Serious, have you ever known someone who's gone missing? If so, what's the story? Half brother. He went missing after going out on the lake with a friend's boat and his girlfriend. It had started raining and storming, and the boat tipped over. His girlfriend made it back to shore. He didn't. They took 2 days to find him. They dragged the lake for his body. He was eventually found dead, washed up on the shore somewhere along the tree line of the lake. I had an employee, Jason, that had worked for us for 6 years. 4 of those directly reporting to me. He was a pretty good worker and a nice guy. One day, a police officer came to our office and said he was looking for Jason. Jason was scheduled off. The officer said, "Jason has a warrant for an unpaid traffic violation. No big deal. He was just wanted to come down to the court building and make arrangements to take care of the legal issue." The next day, we told Jason what had happened. He asked me if he could clock out right then and go down and settle it immediately. I said sure. So he went. Later that same day, he came back to work saying it was all taken care of. Maybe a month went by, and then another officer showed up looking for Jason. The next time Jason was scheduled, I told him another cop came by. He said he had worked out a payment plan for the fine and had forgotten to make the payment. He again asked me if he could leave to take care of it. He left. I never saw him again. Ever. We called the jails in the area to see if they had him. No. We eventually got in touch with his ex. She said that she was looking for him too and hadn't seen him. To this day I don't really know what happened or where he went. Online searches have not turned up anything. He has a pretty common name, so it's like a needle in a haystack. It seemed like a simple traffic fine was hardly a reason to abandon a good job, but we may never know. Had a co-worker employee in high school who went missing for 3 days. Turned out he'd gone out for a walk without telling anyone. A tree had fallen on him, and he'd been unable to free himself. He was dehydrated and obviously shaken when they found him, but he recovered and came back to work a few days later. I've got a couple. My mom's ex-husband disappeared off the face of the earth for over a year and was declared dead. Turned out he'd been jumped by some guys for his car and left bloodied on the side of the road. Woke up and didn't remember who he was. Was in and out of shelters until something jogged a bit of his memory and he got in contact with his then girlfriend. Like he remembered her house but nothing else. Apparently he had a major brain injury when he was a kid that didn't really get treated, that resulted in a big chunk of his brain dying. So when he got jumped it scrambled what was left. Another was a kid I knew who went missing up in Washington. He was riding his bike on some big multi-week trip and just disappeared. His bike was found with all his gear intact, but no sign of him. His remains were found about a year later in the middle of nowhere in something like 5 miles from his bike. This friend of mine's kid went missing 7 years ago now. He was an artist about 17 years old. He was on his way out west, I think to go to school maybe, or to travel before school, I can't remember. But I watched her Facebook posts for the next 6 years as she just slowly unravels. She was looking for her son. Traveling all over the country. Hiring private investigators. Hiring various firms. Spending time in homeless encampments for teenagers. Her marriage dissolved. Husband drank himself out of his job. About 2 years ago she was posting these really long rambling posts about how dare people tell her to get over it and move on. Didn't they know her heart was broken? People that she thought were family would never give up like this on her son. And then they found his bones. And now she's like totally returning to a normal, posting about normal stuff. When I was in middle school, I had a best guy friend. E. He was the class clown. We were stand partners for orchestra. And he always made me laugh. We ended up going to different high schools, though, because of redistricting. So we lost contact. I never forgot about him, though. Last time I saw him, my high school orchestra had a performance evaluation at his school. He still played, so I got to smile and wave at him. Next year, he went missing. His car was found abandoned, but no E. A few weeks later, they found his body. Turns out he committed suicide by throwing himself in front of a truck on the road. Worked at a company where I got real close to the 2 owners. Very odd relationship, but it worked. They had a third business partner who left due to mental illness. He'd pop in every so often and cash a check despite selling his shares, ownerships etc. They still gave him a fairly decent wage for doing nothing. Chill guy. Name was Simon. Long story short, we all went to Amsterdam for a few days to let off steam after a grueling quarter. Had a hangover-esque night out. Woke up to no Simon. Searched high and low. Informed the local police after 24 hours and booked a few extra nights in hopes he'd turn up again. Never did. Booked another 2 nights. Still no luck. Left for home and informed his family and opened inquiries with the police back in the UK. 3 weeks after returning, Simon's wife received a voicemail from a private number, muffled along the lines of "in trouble. Can't come home." They're on to me. This led to some extreme days of questioning at a local drunk tank, but nothing heard from after a further 6 weeks. Case closed. No new evidence etc. Tried to appeal and got shut down. Dude just left, clearly didn't die. Creepy voicemail, but hasn't been heard of since. 2 kids as well. Such a shame. Really booked me out for a while. I used to airsoft when I was a kid, which in my area meant just going out into the woods with a bunch of friends and relative strangers to shoot at each other with BB guns. Teams are established and you wander around until you find some enemies and then you shoot them. At one point, someone realized that one of my friends was missing, so we called off the game and began searching for him. He and his brother were out there that day, so it was, "Hey, game is paused. We have to find one of the Smith kids." We encountered some enemies and yelled to them that the game was paused. Smith kid was missing and we had to find him. Enemies said okay, wandered off in some other direction to look for him. Enemies encountered some of their enemies, my teammates, and explained that someone from our team was missing and had to be found. In this game of telephone, no one realized that the missing person was in this new group of my teammates, so he ended up on a search for himself. My nana and papa. 10 years ago almost to the day. They went missing on July 30th, 2011. The whole family got together for a barbecue and they just never showed up. We spent days looking for them, but never found anything. Some kind stranger spotted their crash truck at the bottom of an incline 3 weeks later. From what the police told us, they misjudged a corner whilst coming down a dirt road up in the mountains. Nana got out of the truck to try and direct papa. The edge of the road gave way, and all of them went down the mountain. According to the autopsies, Nana died from internal bleeding a few hours after the crash. Papa survived a couple of days longer, while he'd been injured in the crash. His precise cause of death was never determined. The family, myself included, thinks he died of a broken heart. They'd been married for more than 60 years by the time they died. Papa probably couldn't imagine a life without Nana. The only bright spot in all of this was their dog, Sassy. She'd been in the truck with them when they crashed. Somehow an elderly schnauzer managed to survive the crash in 3 weeks alone in the Idaho backcountry. She lived out the rest of her days loved and treasured by Nana and Papa's eldest daughter. Nana and Papa were 2 of the kindest, most welcoming people I ever had the pleasure of meeting. I wasn't actually related to them. My mom was a friend of their daughter-in-law, but that never mattered to them. I was their bonus grandkid, and they treated me as such. There was always a plate for me on the table at dinner time and a present under the tree with my name on it at Christmas. Their door was always open for me, a kid from a royally ducked up family. They were something out of a fairy tale. They loved me, no questions asked, and I loved them just as much. It's been a decade now, and I still miss them terribly. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to reminisce. OP. I once met a girl and asked her out. She was 19 years old, but said her parents didn't let her date. I found out from friends that her parents basically kept her and her sister locked down except for going to school for their whole lives. Religion crap. I never saw her again. I moved to the coast later and forgot all about her. Years later I was visiting and a friend told me she had disappeared. They finally found her body a year later. Made me sad to think she never got a chance to even live at all. I can't get very detailed, but my friend's teenage son went missing. The son was a sports star, great kid, had scholarships to his college of choice, was in the top 10% of the student body etc. He was gone for a week, and the whole community really rallied to look for him. Unfortunately, it came to light that 2 of his friends were actually sick shits. He had become a star student when they went to high school, but his 2 friends from elementary school didn't. They had gotten increasingly more jealous of his loving parents, stable finances, scholarships, grades and praise, until they decided to kill him. They had planned their friend's murder, carried it out, hidden his body, then helped look for him, all while knowing he was dead. Their Facebook messages to one another revealed the truth after about a week, and it wasn't long until his body was found. We had a girl in our high school that went missing. Her parents were on the news begging for her to come back, and our entire town was looking for her and holding vigils. Her body was found 3 months later about 10 miles outside of town. Turns out, her mother's boyfriend had been sexually abusing her, and when her mom found out, she was jealous of her own daughter. Mom and mom's boyfriend killed the girl. My brother-in-law's mother went missing for about a month after finding out she had terminal inoperable cancer. She called one day saying, "I'm alive, safe, and on my way home." No one knows where she went, what she did, who she saw, or anything. She took the specifics of that trip to her grave. One of my coworkers went missing for 3 days. Turns out his brother's friend thought it would be funny to slip him acid. They locked him in a closet for 3 days while it wore off. Apparently he went psycho and started screaming about some poet. My mom has gone missing a few times. She's bipolar and has hallucinations, and when it gets bad she will just disappear. Once she moved to Kentucky without telling anyone, and a few times we've called the police, and they found her sleeping in her truck in various places like the state forest or some public places like that. Honestly, the biggest fear is that she'll be found somewhere having committed suicide. My brother's middle school teacher. He just didn't show up to school one day, which was very unusual. The school scrambled to find a substitute for him because they had no notice. We had a whole school meeting like 2 days later when he was officially missing, where they told us all about it. He left the house that morning as usual. According to his wife later said, he was never seen again. Many search parties were organized and people looked for months, but they never found him. He is still officially missing today. A friend's younger sister and her friend. To be honest, when they were declared missing, not many cared at all, including him and his parents. She was a troublemaker and would skip school and was caught numerous times buying or smoking weed. Many thought they'd gotten high and ducked off somewhere. To this day they are still missing. But the scariest thing is that no one really cared at all when the thought of them maybe being dead came up. I went missing once. Had a psychotic break and completely unaware hitchhiked to the hospital, but no one noticed it gone. And it left some note raving about death or something. The police followed my tracks with dogs to the lake in winter and thought it died. They figured it out when I escaped from the hospital, and they found me trying to take the bus home. Bizarre to think it was me, because I have no memory of any of this. The childhood friend of someone I knew was a guy who sold pot. 1980s, he had a room full of Mexican brick weed. He decided to expand his franchise and started selling cocaine on the side. He sold some quantity to a biker gang of the Angels Verity and went to collect tough 5'4" Jewish guy from NY and was gone for almost a year. They found his bones under a bridge in the river up North California. Cash up front, people. Cash up front. Several years ago, a friend's boyfriend went on a hike in the Cascade Mountains. It was late September, which a time of year where the weather conditions can flip at a moment's notice. His hiking buddy said that one minute they were walking and talking, then all of a sudden he looked behind him and realized he was alone. We organized search parties for weeks, but no trace was ever found. The only thing that makes sense is that the guy lost his footing and slid down the mountain, but no one could find evidence of a slide or damaged vegetation. I still wonder if the guy chose to disappear in order to avoid some kind of debt. This was many years ago, but I had a cousin that lived in a remote area of the western US. He had just graduated high school and was working a job putting up fences in a mountainous area. The crew had pretty much finished for the day and had gone back to the campsite when my cousin wandered off from the rest of the group. He did not return. Despite months of searching, no one was able to find him, and eventually my family had services and placed a marker in his honor at the cemetery. Nearly 8 years later, a hunter came across his remains. He was under a tree and his hands were up behind his head, in laid back position, and his wallet was underneath. They assumed that he had gotten high or drunk and fell asleep, only to succumb to hypothermia at the high elevation. It provided closure for his parents and they did inter his remains where the marker had been placed, but we all endured years of agony, dread and frustration through this event. Trigger warning. I had a family friend disappear. He was kidnapped and was forced to write a check to his captor and had his bank accounts emptied. Sadly, he did not let him go. They found him deep in the woods dismembered. He was a good man. He didn't deserve that. The stupid idiot cashed the check and was caught. He was sentenced to life. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.